Maryland football wraps up a season marked by disappointing losses and new rivalries, with the extension of the Big Ten Conference. The future of Maryland football is called into question with the loss of key playmakers and missing out on a fourth consecutive bowl game. All that and more coming up on this edition of the Left Bench in Focus.
We're not there yet, but we are a good team.
Welcome back to the Left Bench in Focus. I'm Laura Shaughnessy, that's Ryan Martin. And Ryan, the Terps just wrapped up a disappointing 2024 campaign with its worst record since pre-COVID.
Yeah, Laura, and just days after their season ended in Happy Valley, Maryland and head coach Mike Locksley are turning their attention to 2025, being cautiously optimistic of some reinforcements who just yesterday put pen to paper. We have a lot of Maryland football to break down, but Laura, the biggest news of the day has to start with the Terps' newly signed quarterback.
That's right. TSC's Jona Jancewicz joins us in Studio B to break down what could be a future game-changing player for Maryland football.
Jonah, what do you have for us?
That's right, guys. A down year, but Michael Locksley and company might have found their future star, Malik Washington. The crown jewel of the Terps recruiting class, Malik Washington, signed with the Terps, a phrase which Maryland fans have been waiting to hear for a very long time. Washington is one of the highest-ranked recruits in Maryland history. 24/7 Sports ranks him as the 50th overall player in the country and the number 5 quarterback in the class. He grew up in the Baltimore area and went to Archbishop Spalding High School. In his senior season, Washington threw for 1,970 yards, 22 touchdowns, to only 3 interceptions on a 65.3% completion percentage. Scouts across the country are saying he's a dual-threat quarterback that can win at the Power 4 level. Washington verbally committed on June 28th, which automatically boosted the Terps class, ranking to number 25 nationally. That ranks as the highest recruiting class for Coach Locksley since 2021. Here's what Locks had to say after signing his QB of the future.
I've recruited Malik since he was an 8th grader. I watched how he built this Spalding program with his head coach there, and a lot like what we've had to do here at Maryland, and it has not been easy. They have not always had all the built-in advantages that some of the other places that they would play had, and he never once wavered, man. And to me, this kid has the sky is the limit for his talent level. You know, he expects to come in the mailroom and work his way up. He doesn't want it any other way.
Putting the pressure of being the future on a singular recruit is unrealistic, but fans hope Malik Washington will be a part of the start of a new age in Maryland football. Back to you guys.
Jonah, thank you so much for breaking things down on Malik Washington. Stick around because we'll head back to you for more on some other recruits the Terps snagged on signing day in a bit. And Laura, you heard right there what Jonah was saying. Maryland expects Malik Washington to come and be that new age that Maryland so desperately needed this season.
Yeah, number 50th overall prospect, number 5 quarterback. Doesn't get much better than that for Maryland right now.
They'll certainly need that, Laura. Because Maryland football's 2024 season didn't come close to the standard head coach Michael Locksley has built up for the program since COVID. After 3 straight bowl wins, the Terps couldn't even muster a 5th victory this year, making the Pinstripe, Mayo, and Music City Bowls feel like a distant memory. But how exactly did Maryland football get here? When did its season go from a hopeful promise to downright disappointment? Well, like Nolan Ray here, the Terps did go on a nice little run to start out its season. Maryland won 3 of its first 4 games against UConn, Virginia, and Villanova, positioning itself well for conference play. But after a defeat at Indiana, Maryland dropped a head-scratching 27-point loss at home to Northwestern. Yet, right when Terps fans raised some doubt, Maryland pulled off its biggest regular season win in years, beating new Big Ten foe USC for the first time in program history, a win worthy of a field storm. And that one felt good for Maryland, and some fans were even saying, "We're back." But like Sam Ellinger at Texas, they couldn't have been more wrong. The Terps turned the momentum from the Trojans' win into 5 straight losses, getting beat in each game by an average margin of over 22 points, dropping Maryland fans off of this roller coaster season at the very bottom.
Here to talk about the Terps season and the future of Maryland football is Steve Suter, former wide receiver and current analyst for Maryland Sports Radio Network. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Steve, you've been covering Maryland with Maryland Sports Radio Network now, 4th season. We just gave our season a review. But from your time in the booth from those years and this year, what did exactly went wrong for Maryland this year compared to previous seasons?
Well, I think it all starts up front for me offensively from the offensive line. I think I knew pretty much early on in the season that it wasn't going to be a good output when it's all said and done from wins-loss perspective. And it's just, I'd never seen so many shuffled offensive linemen in my entire life of watching football. And Maryland, every game would play sometimes 8 linemen and sometimes substituting in the middle of a series. And that's just never a recipe for success. And they just couldn't figure it out all season, which was the 5 guys that they needed up there, which 5 guys were going to be giving them the best chance of success. And it just plagued them all year long. And Billy Edwards was playing very well to start the season, and I thought he played well the entire season. He just didn't have the protection. He didn't have a running game to rely on to then allow play action to be effective. So, I hate to put the blame on one position because it's a whole team, but that's where it starts with me because it starts with every team on the offensive line. They just didn't have one that could produce this season.
Yeah, and Steve, with the extension of the Big Ten this year, how much of a threat do you think Big Ten opponents like Oregon and USC really pose to the future of the program? And what do you think the Terps need to do differently to adjust to their levels of play from what we saw this season?
I think it's great. I actually like the excitement in the added teams to the conference. It's a little shakeup. I traveled to Oregon this year for my first time ever, and it was a long travel, but it's different. I think the kids probably enjoyed it because it is something new, and I just think it'll shake up and put more eyes on every team within the conference. So I don't think it's going to hurt Maryland in any way. If anything, it might boost it. There might be more revenue sharing that comes with it because the conference is in the limelight throughout the season. And so I think those things can only benefit them. They just need to step their game up when it comes to recruiting. And that's what Coach Loxley's been known for. And they really need to work the portal. So that's the new aspect of college football these days. They're probably getting acclimated. Maryland is just like any other team in the conference of how to go about it and how to be effective within it, how to not lose your guys to it. So all things that are fairly new that coaches have to adapt to, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Yes, Steve, you mentioned the new teams coming in and how Maryland has to adapt to that. So do you see this as being a fluke year for Maryland, that they could find the improvements in the portal and recruiting, or could this be the new reality for Maryland with how good the Big Ten is in the near future?
I don't think it's a new reality, no. I think this was an off year for Maryland. I think they are at least a 7-win, 8-win team every year, or at least they should be, in my opinion. They just didn't hit on the portal, and I don't know if it was from the left tackle that was transferred from Buffalo, Isaiah Wright, I believe his name was, that tore his Achilles, I think, his second workout. That left tackle position plagued them all year, and if that one player could have made a difference for them up front to solidify that, you should just never have a true freshman start on the offensive line in the Big Ten. And Terez Davis did a great job, admirable job stepping in at both tackles positions at times. And then Michael Hershey at center, true freshman, got starting playing time too. That just should never happen. So that just shows how thin they were up front. And that when you revamp your offensive line through the portal one year, you're going to have to do it again the next year. And this one, it just didn't hit. So they have a chance. That's the beauty of the portal too, right? They can go back in there this year and try to fix it, and they could have a whole new starting 5 next year that could work well. So it's how well they handle it.
Yeah, and talking about offense, coming from a wide receiver like yourself, some weapons will be departing this offseason with Ty Felton and Caden Prather to the NFL draft. So what or who does Maryland need to fill those gaps on the receiving end?
That's a great question. I was actually looking at the depth chart last week. I had a pregame interview where they were mentioning the MVPs of the team, and we went through those and talked about that. And as I was discussing that, I realized, wait a minute, we're losing Caden Prather and we're losing Ty Felton on the outside. And that leaves the highest productive player, Octavian Smith. But is he a guy that can carry the load, become a Z receiver, become that X receiver that Ty Felton was, getting all the attention? I'm not sure. Shalik Knotts has been there a while. Is his turn to step up? But I feel like we should have seen flashes of that already. So I am nervous for a position at Maryland that has been quoted as and touted as one of the deepest on the team for several years now. All of a sudden looks very thin. So I think they're going to have to attack the portal there as well. Bring in a veteran type guy, that's someone that's used to having all the pressure on him and the focal point of the offense. Where that guy's going to come from, I'm not sure. Or it's going to have to be one of the young guys. So I feel the same way. I'm nervous about the outside next season.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned those nerves with the receiving group, and it's a position that could look differently. And after a 4-win season for Maryland, a lot of positions could look differently. But between the incoming freshmen and transfers who will be new, there's going to be some returners. So who do you have your eye on to step up next season should they be back with Maryland?
Man, it's a good question. it's almost not who I can see doing it, it's who has to do it. And Octavian Smith has to do it. He was inconsistent this season. I know he had some injuries, kind of a little banged up. But if we need to have a playmaker out there, that somebody that can take the ball 5 yards and turn it into 70, it's got to be him. And if it's not, then it has to be Shalik Knott's or Ryan Manning. We don't have enough film on Ryan Manning. I haven't seen him play enough, but it's not even a position now where you can ask guys to do it. They have to do it, or Maryland's going to be in trouble from the outside, because you know what you have in Nolan Ray, I believe. I think everybody was really high on him this season, and I don't think he got the production that we thought he was going to going into the season. And again, that goes back to the inconsistency up front from the offensive line. So I can't say his name because I think that's just an already household name. It's got to be Octavian Smith or Shalik Knott's.
Keep an eye on Smith, Knotts, some of those running backs. Steve, the big thing coming into this season, Malik Washington puts pen to paper this week. When you're looking at Maryland week 1, and you might have Billy Edwards Jr. back, Malik Washington, MJ Morris possibly in there, what is the storyline week 1, and how do you see this quarterback battle really settling out?
Yeah, so that's weird, right? From a standpoint, I'm a guy that does not really pay attention to the recruiting trail and pay attention to the stars and pay attention to the hype of the kids. With that being said, Malik Washington's a little different. So I say that because I've seen it too many times. I've seen high-level recruits come in and just don't pan out. Some of them don't even play. So I don't get my hopes up. I let the kids come in and you see what you get. You don't know if you got a dog. You don't know if you got a dud, right? You're just going to see how the kid acclimates to college. When you get outside of your house with your parents and you go on your own onto a college environment, who knows what is important to you at any given time. So people and their interests change. And I'm not faulting anybody, but a lot of kids find out they don't love football like that. They've just been playing it in high school. They're good at it. They get recruited, they go to college, and they realize they don't have the heart to want to put in the time to be great at that level. So I say that I just caution my emotions. Now, with Malik Washington, he's different. And I say he's different because I got firsthand confirmation of that from Kyle Schmidt, his head coach at Archbishop Spalding, who I played with at Maryland. So he's a good friend of mine. I trust his opinion. I know he knows football. So when I talked to him, this was 2 years ago, I sent him a clip of one of the Spalding receivers. His name's escaping me now, but I asked if he was quote unquote like that. And his conversation with me immediately turned to the freshman quarterback, Malik Washington, who was throwing him the passes. Told me he was the real deal. This was when he was a freshman. Told me he was the real deal. Told me he'd be one of the top recruits in the country at quarterback when he came out, and all that's happening. So I believe Kyle Schmidt. So Malik's the real deal. I'm really anxious to see him. Whether or not, I'll say this: the portal poses a threat. We all know that. But if you bring Malik Washington in and you let Billy run the helm, and you think you're doing the right thing by developing Malik Washington behind Billy, you just don't know how Malik Washington's going to feel about that. He may even think it's the right idea, but then through a whole season, somebody throws $1 million at him in NIL, and he says, you know what, I'll do this again somewhere else. So that's just the landscape of college football that's so tricky. So does Coach Locks navigate that into a way where he feels forced to play Malik Washington, even though maybe he's not ready? So that's something that we're going to have to just watch unfold.
Should be set up for a very exciting August again. Steve Suter, us, and Maryland football fans everywhere will be excited to see how that quarterback battle plays out. Malik Washington, Billy Edwards, what will happen? But that's all we have time for today with Steve. Thanks so much for joining us again, Steve.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
You can catch Steve on the Maryland Sports Radio Network on SiriusXM and follow him on X at Suter_Steve.
Now stay right here, because when we come back, Jona Jancewicz will rejoin us from Studio B for a deeper look into Maryland's football's incoming class of 2029.
And we'll crown our Maryland Football Players of the Year, Pro Terp of the Year, and Top 5 Plays. You won't want to miss it right after this.
Julie was always a voracious reader. She carried 2 novels on an airplane because she'd read one on a 3-4 hour ride. And at some point, I began to notice that she would read a page and couldn't remember what she had just read, and she'd have to go back and read it again.
I don't remember much these days after I read, but less does for me, and I love it.
Welcome back to the Left Bench in Focus as we break down all things Maryland football. And Laura, it's that time of year again when we start to think about the upcoming NFL draft in April.
Yeah, Ryan, we have to talk about the changes Maryland is going to be facing with some significant losses to the program. But let's start with some senior-making moves in the offseason. Ty Felton and Dante Trader Jr. have accepted their invites to play in the 2025 Reese Senior Bowl. Felton was an easy pick for the Senior Bowl with a breakout season this year, setting multiple program records. Trader Jr. was also selected. He was named Big Ten Player of the Week earlier this season against Virginia. He ends his career with 190 tackles and 20 pass deflections over the course of his 4-year stint with the Terps. The game is set for February 1st with kickoff at 2:30.
Not only will Felton and Trader play in the Senior Bowl in February, but the senior duo also represent 2 of the 5 All-Big Ten selections Maryland football earned on Monday. The biggest accolade was given to Ty Felton. Maryland football's favorite pass catcher this season is the first Terp in 3 years to be named a first-team All-Big Ten selection, and the first Terp receiver to be named first-team All-Conference since now NFL star DJ Moore. Dante Trader Jr. and Bryce McPherson were each named honorable mention All-Big Ten, while linebacker Ruben Hippolyte II and defensive back Glendon Miller also earned honorable mentions from the media.
3 Terps announced that they'll be declaring for the NFL Draft next year. Ty Felton, Quayshawn Fuller, and Caden Prather announced their intent to go pro earlier this week. Both Felton and Prather's departures are hard hits to Maryland's offense. Felton capped off his collegiate career by leading the Big Ten in receptions as well as receiving yards. Prather leaves his mark with a notable impact on the Terps' offense as well. His career-high 9 catches and 111 yards helped lift Maryland over USC in the 29-28 win. Defensively, Quayshawn Fuller received honorable mention All-Big Ten last season and will be a missed core defensive piece.
Well, Laura just mentioned some departing pieces, and we already touched on big addition in Malik Washington to Maryland's squad next year.
But that's not all, as Maryland added 20 more signees from early signing day as of this recording. Jona Jancewicz is back in Studio B to talk about more additions to next year's squad. Jonah?
Malik Washington isn't the only big name who's coming to Terpsville. Let's take a look. Let's start with 4-star defensive lineman Bryce Jenkins, who looks to beef up the Maryland front 7. Bryce is from just right down the road in Hyattsville. The local star went to Friendship College Academy in D.C. for high school and is the 2nd highest ranked player in D.C. in this class, according to 24/7. When you think of 2 sports stars, you think Bo Jackson, you think prime-time Deion Sanders. But for Maryland, it is Bud Coombs, who's not only committed for football, but for baseball too. The 2 sports DeMatha standout is ranked as the #1 prospect in baseball for the state of Maryland and is also looking to help bolster the running back room for the Terps. Sticking with the offense, we have a flip. 4-star Zamir Smith flipped from Alabama to Maryland back in July. In high school, Smith played both defensive back and running back, but will most likely join Coombs in the running back room. But who knows? With Travis Hunter's massive year at Colorado probably going to win the Heisman, could there be a chance for Smith to play both ways as a Terp? Here's head coach Mike Loxley's thought with more of some of these big signings.
Obviously, the 2025 class for us here at Maryland is a special class, one that I believe will elevate the Maryland football program. A lot of these guys made a decision to come to Maryland prior to or started the process prior to the 3-year run that we had up to this season. And the players that we have here have left a really good runway for our incoming class.
And guys, a couple other notable signees: interior offensive tackle Jalen Gilchrist from Salem High School, a big 4-star recruit that can help on the line. Tight end JT Taggart from Callert Hall, who's also the son of former Oregon and Florida State head coach, now assistant for the Ravens, Willie Taggart. Maryland also got another quarterback in Jackson Hamilton from Texas, a couple more offensive linemen. The team is formulating for next year, but the biggest questions now come from the next step, the transfer portal. Back to you guys.
Yeah, and Ryan, that acquisition of Jalen Gilchrist is huge with him picking Maryland over Georgia and South Carolina. That's going to be big for the offensive line.
Yeah, Laura, you just heard what Jonas said, a big addition. He means that literally for a unit that was really disappointing for Maryland last season. They want to shore up that offensive line. Jonah mentioned the transfer portal at the end, too. We'll see if they get some of those pieces, but expect Gilchrist to be a big role next year.
Absolutely. Now it's time to name our Offensive Player of the Year. We had to go with a Terp who shattered several program records during his time with the Terps and was recently named First Team All-Big Ten. You guessed it, it's star wide receiver Ty Felton. Felton's game has been on a steady incline since his arrival in 2021. He led the Big Ten in both receptions and receiving yards and finished tied for 3rd in receiving touchdowns. The senior finishes with 15 more receptions than the next closest Big Ten player and 140 more receiving yards. Felton's 96 receptions were also the most out of all Power Conference players, setting a single-season program record. Congrats to Ty on being named our Offensive Player of the Year.
Well, as Laura just said, Felton was the clear choice for offense. But for a Maryland defense that had the least amount of sacks and gave up the second most points per game in the Big Ten, the answer wasn't so easy. But one player shined this season despite missing a few games, and that's defensive back Dante Trader Jr. Trader Jr. has been a leader on the Maryland defense for the past 2 years. He missed 2 games this season due to injury, but still finished second on the team with 59 total tackles. Trader added an interception and 5 pass deflections this year, polishing off his resume before beginning the NFL draft process. Congrats to Dante on being crowned our Defensive Player of the Year.
Last but not least, to cap off our football awards, it's Tarheeb Still as our Pro Terp of the Year. Still was selected as a 5th-round pick by the Los Angeles Chargers earlier this year. But it wasn't until recently that he showed NFL fans what Terp Nation has already seen before. Still shined in the Chargers matchup against Atlanta on Sunday. He intercepted Kirk Cousins twice in the game, one of which was a pick six that gave the Chargers their only touchdown of the game. In 30 career games played at Maryland, Still's only game with multiple interceptions was last September in Maryland's 42-14 win over Virginia. Congrats to Still for being named our Pro Terp of the Year.
Well, Laura, to end things off for this Left Bench in Focus episode, it's time for the top 5 plays for Maryland's 2024 season. Why don't you get us started?
All right, here we go. Coming in at number 5, we have Billy Edwards to tie Felton against Villanova, getting it in the end zone, going up there, close contact, but gets away with the 6.
Well, from going from offense to defense, LeVan the Man Scruggs with a game-changing third-quarter interception against USC. That was his lone pick of the year, but it couldn't have come for Maryland at a better time.
And back to USC again, we have a huge blocked field goal by Donnell Brown. A huge win. It's a catalyst for change in this game for the Terps. And there we go.
For Maryland, coming in at number 2, the Terps up by 30 points against UConn, but it doesn't matter for Ruben Hippolyte II, the veteran linebacker. Tip drill, hot potato interception, whatever you want to call it, the veteran is there for the big-time pick.
And coming in at number 1, of course, we had to pick Ty Felton's 75-yard touchdown against UConn, doing what he does best, taking it all the way for the Terps. And if we see this again, you see the cool spin move by Felton, quick on his feet as always, bringing it back up for the Terps, taking it right down to the end zone for 75 yards. And I believe after he was asked about that play, and I thought it was funny how he said when he was a kid, he used to hate getting tackled and hit, so that's why he runs so fast, and he just does what he does best all the time.
If you're just faster than everyone, I guess you'll never have to get tackled. Maybe that'll translate to the next level for Ty Felton. We'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
Well, Laura, that will do it for our final edition of the Left Bench in Focus for this semester. Ricky Podgorski and Alex Gary will be back behind the desk for one final show of the Left Bench before winter break.
For now, you can keep up with all of our Terrapin Sports Central coverage on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.